All right, let's go ahead and get started because we're 4 minutes late. The voice you're hearing, potentially the face you're seeing, is Mike Williamson. I am the assistant director of our digital, dim the lights. I am the assistant director of our digital accessibility office at CU Boulder. And just a real quick rundown of our office. Our office is tasked with testing, manually testing digital environments on our campus. And that's the majority of the work that we do. And Marisha's probably going to talk more about that. So let me pass the mic to Marisha.
Hi, I'm Marisha. I am the manager of building usability testing at CU Boulder. And not here today is Addie Hugan. She is one of our senior testers. While she wasn't able to present with us today, she has been huge in making sure that this project is gone the way it's gone. So I did want to mention her name as well.
Hi, I'm Emily Young, and I work for the Office of Data Analytics at the University of Colorado. I've been a user experience designer, researcher, front-end programmer for almost 30 years now.
Hi, I am Gautam. So I'm working for Office of Data Analytics as a student assistant, and I've been working since 3 months in the development of custom module for Drupal.
Yep. All right, we'll get moving.
So before we get into any demos, we want to quickly go over what assistive technology is. And so assistive technology is any item, piece of equipment, software program, or product system that is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of persons with disabilities. Today we're going to be using a screen reader, and so a screen reading application is considered assistive technology. The one we'll be using today is called JAWS, which stands for Job Access with Speech. It is a screen reader. Mike is going to be demoing with it today. It's going to sound really fast, but it's synthesized speech that a user can use to navigate through a page. So screen readers will rely on that speech and keyboard commands on a computer or gestures on a mobile device to understand the setup of a page. This allows users to jump for headings, paragraphs, and there's a lot of tools in that to allow users to be able to understand the material on the page.
All right, so we're ready to demo?
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to do our first screen reader demo here. As Marisha said, the screen reader is going to talk very quickly. To our ears, it's probably going to be very slow, but if you've never heard a screen reader talk before, it's going to be hard to pick up the speech. Don't worry about trying to keep up with what's being said. We're going to try to highlight what's being said as we go through it. And I think the first one we're going to start with, we're going to turn the screen off. So all we want you to do is listen. There's not going to be any visual input for what we're doing. All right. So give me 3 seconds, maybe a little bit longer as I get my computer set up for our screen reader.
We're going to be using a Tableau dashboard, and it's the historical enrollment at CU. This dashboard will give information on how many students are enrolled, break that down by gender or graduate versus undergraduate. And so it's a rather simple dashboard in that it's just giving the enrollment numbers. But we're going to start with that one and give you a sense of how someone can navigate when they first land on that page.
Our first indication that something is amiss is I think I'm sharing through Hop-In, and I tried to use my keyboard commands to launch my screen reader, and I believe those keyboard commands are probably stolen by the interface. So if you all saw me rapidly trying to punch on my keyboard, nothing was happening. I actually ended up having to use my mouse because it seems like our Hop-In instance is stealing the keyboard commands for my screen reader. Ooh, you know what? I wonder if it's gonna vocalize out to us here. There we go. All right, that sounds faint to me. Could you hear that when it came through, or is that faint to you as well? Video or audio is really faint. What we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about what's going on this screen here. So what we're looking at, and Marisha, please jump in and correct me if I'm wrong with anything. What we're looking at here is a CU Boulder Tableau visualization. And what we were having our colleague Addie do is navigate through and try to identify, hey, what data is being shared with you on this screen. Visually, we know that there are some data points being shown. We know that there's a focus year and term dropdown. And so the first thing we did is tell Addie, hey, look for the year. Try to see if you can get to a year that sounds good to you and activate data from that year. Addie was unable to I think she was unable to determine that there was a drop down, but did hear, hey, there's a date here. So in her brain, she said, okay, well, I'm just going to try to activate this on Faith. When we say activate, we mean press enter on our keyboard. I'm going to activate this on Faith and see if I can get that thing to pop open. She was right. It popped open, and then she tried to down arrow through, and she wasn't getting any feedback. As she continued to try to down arrow through to find a date, nothing was happening. She ended up stopping because she didn't know what was going on. And as soon as she stopped down arrowing, the Tableau instance caught back up to her and read out all the dates that she had arrowed down through, starting with 1877, I think, until 1920 or something along that. So the experience was, okay, here's a date, 1877, enter. List drops open visually, but Addie didn't hear anything. She's like, okay, I heard 1877. I'm just going to, on Faith, down arrow through and see if I can find a date that I want. Down arrow, down arrow, down arrow, down arrow, down arrow, no feedback whatsoever. As soon as she stopped, then the screen reader said 1877, 1878, 1879, all the way to 1920. That was a really long pause, and we still didn't get where we wanted to go. Then actually, let me not talk for you. Then you asked Addie to do what?
I wanted to know the total students for the year that she landed. Originally, we asked, like, let's pick a more recent year, but there was no way she was going to be able to arrow through from 1877 to 2021. This wasn't going to happen. So she attempted to find how many students were enrolled, and I think the year was like 1920 or something like that. There is visually on the screen, you can see it says 14 for that total students. That's not actually text. She could not read that information. The screen reader could not read that. If she continued to tab forward or navigate forward, that line chart there or even those other filters would just read as data visualization, press enter, or press space to enter, or something like that. Nowhere was she able to actually read any information on the screen.
So the problem here is visually, you can look at this visualization and get some idea of the main numbers, the main data that's being presented. With Addie's experience utilizing a JAWS screen reader, she was unable to find any of that at-a-glance data that's available to a sighted user. And that's the experience we wanted to show with you here.
And JAWS will read off of the code from the page, the HTML code. And so while we say that Addie couldn't read it, it was not due to her not understanding how a dashboard is. It was due to incompatibility between Tableau and JAWS being read.
All right. Maybe. All right, so our next slide, so we're going to pull you back from our bad attempt to do a demo for you and pull you back into content here for a little bit. So we asked the question, what is accessibility and usability? And for us, accessibility is a user experience issue. It's a usability issue. And so we pull them together. Our office, our campus even, thinks of an accessibility issue as ultimately a usability issue. A user can't interact with their environment. And so our definition of accessibility, reading directly from our slide here, is that all people have access to the same information, interactions, and services as everyone else. And when we talk about usability, we put it in 4 terms. We've got an F and 3 C's is what we call it. The F is functional. If it's usable, the technology is going to do what it's supposed to do, right? If it's a data visualization tool, I should be able to get data from it. That's the function of that tool. If it's a calendaring app, I should be able to look at dates and see what's available to me. That tells me it's functional if it does that very baseline piece. Then we get into the 3 C's. The first C is convenient. And that means it's not difficult to access the information. It's not difficult to access the environment, the controls within that environment. It's convenient for me to use. The next C is consistent, meaning that that experience doesn't change every time I go back into that system. It's the same experience every time I go back in. I don't have to relearn the rules every time I enter a new instance. And that also means that you're not breaking design convention from what we understand in the digital environment. We understand how a web page is supposed to work. There are certain components that exist on a web page that we expect to work in a specific way. And if you as a developer, and not you all, but anybody as a developer or designer breaks that design convention, that creates roadblocks in that environment, and we have to relearn how the new rules of that environment, even though it's the same type of environment that we're used to. So consistent, it needs to be the same experience. The rules can't change every time I go back in. And then the last C is comfortable, excuse me. The environment, the experience of that environment should not cause pain, should not cause distress. So when we're talking about comfortable, that could be physical pain. Are you having me move my fingers around a keyboard in a very uncomfortable way to engage in your keyboard keystrokes? You're asking me to stretch my fingers out, maybe memorize a bunch of keys all together to interact with your environment. That's not comfortable. So that could be physical discomfort. Mental discomfort. You're asking me, and I touched on this, you're asking me to memorize too much about your environment to know where I'm supposed to go, rather than it just being intuitive and making sense. You're causing me mental discomfort. And if all those things don't work, and this is a system I need to get into, you run the risk of creating mental and emotional discomfort for me as your end user. So we need that system, if it's going to be truly accessible, to be comfortable as well. So to sum that up, usability, we frame it as it's functional, that the technology does what it's supposed to do. It's convenient. I can get to it with relative ease. It's consistent. The rules don't change. And then it's comfortable. It doesn't cause me distress or pain.
So why did we even pick Tableau? And one of the things with Tableau as a data visualization tool is that, generally, you can make an accessible dashboard. But where does that come from? And so I want to make sure we're good on time, but where that information comes from is a VPAT, which stands for a Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. These are given with software and products to tell an end user how accessible the product is. A VPAT will go based off of the WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and it'll tell someone if it supports or if it partially supports. On the screen, there's an image of a level A from the guidelines, meaningful sequence, and even Tableau acknowledges that it only partially supports. You could have seen the demo that the screen reader flow does not make any sense. It would jump all over the place. We have to select 100 different numbers before we get to the one we want to get to. That's not accessible. But Tableau notes it as partially supported. So we have this slide in here that we get this information and it looks a lot different on a VPAT because it's generally the business side of a company filling these out versus how it is actually in the when the user is using it, which is partially why our office is there, is to test these things, because we don't want to take something out of VPAT's word. And we've been harping on Tableau, but it's not just Tableau. Accessible data visualization is just intrinsically hard. None of the options we've tested before have been fully accessible, but Tableau does some things well. And one of the things that it does well is that it creates a HTML table. Now, screen readers read HTML really well. The problem is that we can't get to this table very easily, but Tableau gives us this table, which is very helpful if we can then do something with it, which is where our proof of concept came from.
So CU sent out a survey to every single staff member, student, and faculty member to ask them about how they felt about campus culture. This was one of the questions. At CU, I'm treated like I belong. For people who did not self-report a disability, 62% of the people agreed with that. For people who did self-report a disability, 51% of the people agreed with that statement. So I'm here to tell you the story about how I helped create a dashboard that was supposed to measure inclusivity on campus that was completely inaccessible to anyone who uses a screen reader or assistive technology. So the survey was huge, it was 6 languages and a huge campus outreach. The time to develop, to deal with the results was extraordinarily small, and then that time was halved. I was brought in at the end to help with the dashboard, and I was fairly new to Tableau, but I had developed accessible content before, and so I read up on all of Tableau's best practices, and I used some automated tools to kind of check for accessibility. And I started to get a little worried that tools pointed to a couple of things that might be an issue, but CU is extraordinarily lucky to have the Digital Accessibility Office, where they are experts in all things accessibility, and they have expert testers who rely on using screen readers to navigate the digital world themselves. And so I handed the dashboard off to them, and they came back to me and said that it was 100% inaccessible. It was just not accessible at all. And it was a disaster. It was a disaster. We tried to make some adjustments to it, but we couldn't fix it. So once the dust settled a little bit, I decided that I wanted to look into what went wrong and is there anything that I could do to fix it. So I'm assuming that everyone here that is watching is familiar with basic HTML. This is a header tag and a paragraph tag and a link tag. And if a browser saw that HTML file, it would render something that looks like this. So what do you think that this HTML is telling us about? Well, okay, there are a lot of divs within divs within divs. I don't see any content. There's an ARIA label, that's good. ARIA labels help out assistive technology, and it says marks, pressed enter to open the view data window. So let's see. Okay, so that's what that HTML was rendering. This button, this little teal button that has central as the title. Nowhere in that HTML was the text central anywhere. So yeah, this is what we would want to see. This is what we would want to see, a button tag that has the text in there, and then it would get rendered like this. So the example that I showed before was from Tableau, but I have to tell you that this is endemic to almost all modern websites. This is a problem. If you go and look at the source code for Amazon or anything, you're gonna see HTML that looks like that. So there are very good reasons why we ended up here. We moved away from having very static websites to expecting our websites to be fully functional kind of software applications that do very dynamic and complicated things. And so when you have, like end user tools that then generate an interim JavaScript that then generate another JavaScript that gets brought down to a browser, which is going to take that JavaScript and render the HTML, you get things that looked like the example before. If accessibility hasn't been taken in to the design from the beginning, and in most cases it's not. So the problem is that assistive technology, how it works, is it looks at the HTML, it interprets the HTML and makes sense of it. So, and the tools actually do an amazing job. We weren't able to hear, but But they do an amazing job of making sense of this really complicated HTML. But it reaches a point where they just can't. And it's further complicated by the fact that there are multiple different tools, assistive technology tools, and they will interpret complicated HTML differently. The browsers will render the HTML differently. So what it looks like in Safari, that HTML might be different than what it looks like in Chrome. So there's been this move to what's called semantic HTML. And that's where the elements in the HTML clearly define the content, and then that HTML is structured logically on the page. So, you might say like, well, great, okay, we'll just do everything in semantic HTML. But, that's fine if you have complete control over the situation. But if you're using third-party tools to help you, and almost all modern websites are built, relying on other code, then that's you get what you get. But I started to look at, I went back to all the information from Tableau, and I started to look at, well, how can they say that, they're accessible? And it became clear to me that Tableau's solution is to offer a very well-documented and robust API that you can use to then serve up their charts. And as Marisha showed you, they do a nice job of actually taking the visualization. I thought that was going to be the hard part, but they take the visualization and they generate an HTML table of those points. And people who are good at using assistive technology are usually very expert and facile if you have a well-structured table in being able to glean content from that. So yeah, I was like, okay, so we've got this, I can use this API, but then if I'm not using the Tableau server to serve up the dashboard, well, where will this live? So that brought me to Drupal, and why Drupal? Well, it's Boulder CMS, but I'm not on that team, and they have a huge amount of work that they're responsible for already. But still, it seemed like a good choice. I looked at the HTML that was generated by Drupal. It was good semantic HTML for the most part. I started this work last summer and was also very impressed with 10.0 having a very forward-looking commitment to accessibility that I just saw over and over again. And then finally, the fact that it was open source and extensible with modules. So back in the dark ages, I had a computer science degree, and I thought, well, heck, I could develop a module, So I don't know if he's here. John yesterday pointed me to the Drupal learning curve cartoon with the tractor on top that's pushing the bodies over. And so, yeah, it quickly became clear to me that I could not create a custom module until I found a module called Component that with Larry Garfield developed. And he does, if you use Component, they do all the back end, and you just can write the JavaScript. And so I was like, okay, this is just a proof of concept. I can write the JavaScript to use the API. I started to work closely then with DAO on what this could look like, and especially trying to leverage the fact that we had all these dashboards that were already written. Could we do things where we would just allow people to enter in the URL for the Tableau server, and we could generate a web page that worked. So I will hand it back for another demo, and we'll probably have to talk it through this. But I would say just do the demo and then yeah.
All right, we're going to try it again with JAWS. everybody in live in-person attendance is going to have trouble hearing our screen reader. I'm going to try to vocalize what our screen reader is saying as we do this. All right. Is this working? All right. Okay. So where we're at right now, we're at this hour. I say hour. Emily and Gautam have done amazing work. Their hard work here on this Drupal instance where we've stashed some of the data visualization. So I'm going to utilize my keyboard to navigate through the environment. And I'm going to drive, but Marisha's going to navigate and tell me where to go. And then I'm going to stop and explain what's happening every so often.
When a screen reader comes to a new page, one of the ways to get kind of associated with the page is to jump around headings to get an idea of the structure. Headings are like the table of contents of the page. So do you want to jump around by heading?
I sure can. So I'm going to press a keyboard command to tell my screen reader, hey, move to the next heading on the page. And then we heard main navigation, heading level 2. I'm going to try again. Let me read that again. Heading level 2 something, but my hearing's bad. I'll try again. Then we hear historical enrollment, heading level 1. So I'm going to stop for a second right here. Right now, we're vastly different than where we were with just the Tableau data visualization because I have a heading structure available to me. Before, I think we had one heading on the Drupal, the Tableau instance, and then nothing else. And so headings allow a screen reader user, somebody that can't see the screen, allow them to make sense of how that page is laid out. And it also tells them where the important content is around a page. If I don't have that as a screen reader user, it's very hard to navigate and understand what's going on. You want me to keep going?
Yeah, a few more headings.
Filters, heading level 2. Show enrollment of, heading level 3. Focus here, heading level 3. If you're able to see it on our screen, we also have a little, I think it's red rectangle or a focus indicator telling us where our screen reader is going on the page as well. Keep going. Enrollment for focus here, heading level 2, I think. Total students, heading level 3.
Perfect. And if you adjust the focus here to 2021.
Yeah, I'm going to go back through my headings because I think there was a focus year heading. All right, and I'm going to own up. We've done this a million times, so I know where I'm going, but it's still fairly simple to navigate through this page. And you want me to make it to what? 2021. If you recall us talking about the year before, we struggled to find the year we wanted in the drop down on the Tableau instance. We're going to give this a look here. All right, so there's a combo box here. It says 1877. I'm going to try to find 2021. 2021? I'm going to read to make sure it went where I wanted it to go. And then I have here 2021. So right away, I was able to quickly jump to the year I needed. Also, there's that drop down. I'm going to get out of that and get out of this field.
It does take a little bit to load, but there are those heading level 3s that are the big data points: total students, total female, the male percent. Can you also adjust the filter to show level undergrad versus grad?
Yeah. So I'm in the show enrollment of radio button group. I'm on all students, I think is what it said now. I'm going to activate level undergrad versus grad. All right. You may not be able to hear it there, but what it told me was you activated that button. I need that feedback to let me know, hey, your choice that you made is active now. We didn't get that in the other instance either. So now we know, hey, my filters are being appropriately applied now.
And so while it does work on not our internet and it is a little slow to begin with, but one of the benefits of using Drupal, can you jump to the graph?
Yeah. I'm going to jump by headings because I'm assuming that there's a heading for our chart or graph. So there I heard enrollment line graph heading level 2. I know, hopefully, I won't say I know. I'm hoping that there's a line graph underneath this content here.
So we still have that line graph, that data visualization, because while it's not helpful for screen reader users, it is still helpful for other users who want to take more of a universal design approach, that we still have that available. But then we also have a table. You want to jump to the table?
Sure. Knowing that there's a table on this page, I can then tell my screen reader, hey, go to the next table on this page. And then it's going to tell me you're in a table. This is all the content that's in the table. And you're sitting on cell A1, essentially.
And so this allows us to get specific data points, but it also, those original headings for the big call out for important data pieces like total enrollment was easy to find by heading. We can navigate by table. We still have that line graph. And so now this Drupal instance caters to a lot more than just the original Tableau dashboard. It also allows for users, because one of the kind of, I'm going to put in air quotes, workarounds to inaccessible dashboards is to just provide an Excel sheet. That's not equitable when we have to have a different degree of data literacy for someone to read the information given. And so this is a more equitable experience in that someone can get the information that was on the original dashboard without having to ask for help or wait for an office to be open to call them or a whole string of things. It's more of an equitable experience.
Excellent. We're ready to go back to, all right, we're going to end the screen reader demo there, and I'll pass it back.
So as we have seen the demo, our custom component that is written in vanilla JavaScript has solved our primary requirements, but there are still some problems, like firstly, the performance issue. The page takes time to load all the information, and secondly, because there is no standard Drupal module available, we were unable to leverage Drupal open source community. So to overcome these issues, we worked on optimizing our JavaScript code. We have conducted a comprehensive audit on our JavaScript code base to identify bottlenecks and the area of improvement like minification, optimizing loops and conditions, and reducing DOM manipulation. While Drupal offers some modules like charts, our largest issue with Tableau are its controls, filters, buttons, and layouts, not the data visualization, even though charts module provides some good data visualizations. We also tried to create our custom module from our existing JavaScript custom component to check if there will be any performance boost. The improvement to our code resulted only minor performance improvements, but the number of API calls to the Tableau server remained constant. So Tableau is structured in the form of sheets. As we have demonstrated in our historical enrollment dashboard, there are 6 sheets, where each sheet we retrieve information from different API calls. So how do we reduce the number of API calls? We plan to create a central repository using Minio, which is an open source, high performance and distributed object storage server. Minio is compatible with Amazon S3 API, making it easy to integrate with various applications and services that support S3 bucket. Our plan involves building a data pipeline that extracts data from Tableau server and loads it into Minio. By doing this, we only have data in one place, enabling us to retrieve all the required data using a single API call. So this is the framework which we have come up with. Initially, the dashboard creators will build a dashboard and the relevant data will be sent to the central repository, which is Minayo. From there, the dashboard authors will then configure the Drupal component to create the Drupal web page that is structured logically with the accessible controls. The Drupal component which will pull the data from the data repository and users interact with the web page. In future, we plan to contribute this module to the Drupal open source community, and we are also looking for collaborators and feedback. So I will hand over.
Yeah. Practice.
All right, so we harp on accessibility, but we also think everybody should. When someone is creating a dashboard, we really urge them to consider the audience. Everything should be made with accessibility in mind, and if it's public or has a large audience or is going to go to an audience that uses assistive technology, it needs to be made accessible. And so when we say consider accessibility, we're really saying consider your audience. We've really examined screen reader accessibility. We've definitely attended sessions where color contrast or color alone is kind of the focus, but accessibility is more nuanced. So consider your audience. Do you have videos that need captions? Do you have someone using a screen reader? Make sure it's screen reader accessible. Are you having people attend who may not perceive color? Then don't use color alone. So accessibility is a lot more nuanced. So when you consider accessibility, consider the audience that it's going to. So we do have some accessibility tips with that in mind, because Mike and I have done this work for a long time. We have resources like our senior testers to help us create these types of dashboards and these proof of concepts, and we have great partners like Emily and Guanam. But there are some things that everybody can consider, and so we kind of break it down into style tips and technical tips. So for style, keep clear, simple data and content. It shouldn't take like a degree in rocket science to be able to understand a dashboard. We also want to keep a consistent layout. So if we move around through different dashboards, we understand that we don't have to relearn a whole dashboard. We also want to limit blank space. While we've looked at screen readers, screen magnification is also necessary. And if we have a lot of blank space, it can lead someone to believe that the page has ended before it has because of the magnification software they're using, especially if it's at like 200 or 300% magnified. Do not just use video or image alone. You can still use video and image, but they need to have appropriate alternative text or captions, but it should be used supplementally. And then use appropriate color contrast. There are plenty of online checkers that help someone determine the appropriate color contrast, because I, for one, cannot just look at colors and determine if it meets or not. And then technically, use descriptive labels or links for links and buttons. Click here tells me nothing about where a link is going to take me, so we want to make sure it's descriptive. We do not want to impose time limits to interact with content. That gets very frustrating for screen reader users if their focus is being pulled because of a timer. Do not rely on documents for help information, or if you are, make sure that they're accessible. And then provide contact information, both phone and email, and please have someone answer those, because then it can definitely help someone who might be having issues with dashboard or with whatever. We're talking about dashboards, but this also works for different softwares and products as well. We do have some resources in our PowerPoint as well, more so about accessibility. Our office, we have a great colleague who has a beautiful resource page from PDF accessibility to PowerPoint to just general, what is link, how to create a better link label. We also have a newsletter that goes out monthly. There are also general resources like WebAIM has wonderful, like a free course that you can learn more about accessibility, and LinkedIn Learning also has accessibility trainings. However, not all trainings are created equally with LinkedIn Learning. Our office puts focus on usability and accessibility. We want to hear from people within the community. We use manual testing. All of those are very important to our office, but a lot of people don't find those as important. So there are some trainings that focus more on like an automated checker or some AI, whereas that's not good enough in our eyes. So if you go to LinkedIn Learning, just take it with a grain of salt.
So all of the browsers have some great accessibility tools built in, and we've linked out to one of them here. All right, so This was another question that was asked in the survey. And this one was just asked to undergraduate students. I do not feel left out. For people who did not report a disability, 30% of the people disagreed with that. So they said that they felt left out of our undergraduate students, and that's pretty bad. 42% of the people who self-reported a disability said that they felt left out. When we build something that a group of people can't use, we are leaving them out. We are explicitly telling them that they do not belong. When sorry. I felt very bad when I realized the part that I had played in this situation. And I do feel like a lot of times content creators and developers can take a lot on our shoulders. And we're actually told, we're given the responsibility that like, make this accessible, you know? And so we do need to do our best to make sure that we're creating content and building tools that allow for accessible content. But the more that I've worked on this, I've really started to think too that there are some other groups that also must do better. Our stakeholders must do better. They need to give us the time and the money and the tools to be able to do what we're going to do. And we need to advocate up to them on that. And yes, it might cost a little bit more money or take a little bit more time, perhaps not. But we decide on priorities all the time for projects that then impact the resources involved. And accessibility has to be one of them. In my experience, if from a content creator and developer point of view, if you start with accessibility at the front, you usually end up with something that is cleaner and more robust and more usable in general. So it's worth it. The other group that must do better are our vendors. They really need to make a commitment to accessibility, to prove that commitment by using real-world, robust examples of how that tool will be accessible, not little cherry-picked things. And we and our stakeholders need to put pressure on vendors to make sure that they're delivering something that when the use case of most people who use that tool is a certain thing, then that is what needs to be accessible. And, you know, we've mentioned several times that we've been kind of focused on Tableau. They are not the worst by far. You know, this is a problem for many vendors, and it's our job as being part of this community to really have our eyes opened and do what we can to make sure that we are not leaving anybody out. We're actively looking for collaborators on this work. We would love to talk to anybody who would be interested in it. And I don't know, Matthew, if we have time for any questions, we'd love to hear any questions that anybody has.
So there's one from the interwebs, and that Ahmed asked, did you create a custom module to integrate Tableau data with your Drupal instance? If yes, are you planning to share the module with the community? And if you wouldn't mind repeating the
Yes.
question.
So the question was, did we create a custom module and are we planning on sharing it? Yes, we have. So I didn't, but then luckily we got him for the summer. He's been here full time and he's going to be continuing part time. He's a graduate student in computer science. And so Gautam took my kind of jury-rigged thing, and he has actually written a real Drupal module. And we've been talking to some of the people here about, how can we make that available to the community, but it's something that we absolutely want to do. Did you have any?
Yeah, so currently we have worked on a basic module. And still there is some work in progress, and yeah, it should be done by within 1 or 2 weeks.
But we would love to have some Drupal experts give us a hand.
Yeah.
It's not really a question, it's just because you all, you worked on a very particular problem space that I think a lot of the world has a hard time understanding of, and looks to go to it. You're in a unique event where I think everyone understands too, what you all did. Like, a lot of people would have seen that and been like, well, sorry, that's what Tableau does, and we're just stuck with it. And you all refused to stay there and came up with this really impressive, really creative solution. And then you didn't even stop there. You're also contributing that back to provide an open source community for everyone to benefit from it and use. That's just huge. So I just kind of wanted, maybe we can just give a round of applause to them. This is a huge achievement.
I'd echo that. You should be very, very proud.
Thank you. That means a lot. But I have to say, I'm sorry that the demo didn't really work, because it was shocking to me when, especially I had worked on some accessibility things before, but I hadn't realized how much I used my eyes, even when I'm hearing the reports, to make sense of what was going on. When I couldn't see the screen and Addie was working to navigate things, it was shocking to me, and I was very disturbed that is her reality. That is this world that we've created.
I would love to, I'm out of view of the camera, but this is Mike Williams again. I would, Marisha just put it up on screen. If you are interested in seeing the demo videos, we will share those with you so that you get the full effect of the screen reader experience. So just email the AUL at colorado.edu if you want access to that. And I don't know if we've shared that with the camp attendees overall. But anyway, if you don't have it, email us. We'll give you the videos, and you can ask us any further questions as well. And then Emily's got her email address up there as well.
Hey, sorry, I just asked this before the post. Sorry to put you on the spot for solutioning, but this is. I work on a .gov website that has a whole bunch of inaccessible campus PDFs, which zoom in, if you're a sighted user, you can see all the details of various campuses, but it's super inaccessible and really difficult. Contrast needs and stuff. What is the biggest way you think, Drupal module-wise, to rip out those terrible PDFs and paste those maps?
I can't speak to the technical aspects. We are working with a couple vendors that do produce campus maps, and they've created, they too want to get out of paper, quote unquote, paper maps, right? And so I'm not going to name names because I don't want to, well, yeah, we haven't tested it fully, and I don't want to stand up here and pretend that we're endorsing anybody, but we're working with a couple vendors now on the accessibility of their interactive maps. But I don't have any technical speak on how do we solve the PDF.
Again, I would have to look at kind of what was being done, but I would kind of look at what is the raw material for the PDFs, how are they being generated, and kind of start there with, some of the resources that are available about how do you make PDFs as accessible as possible, and then see if the module could help, like put those pieces in place.
I think I'm a follow up. I think the best answer to that is forget about PDFs and try to figure out how to put it on the web. And I'm getting claps for that, yes.
We're going to wrap up this session now, and we do have lunch in the dance studio for everybody. Also remember, if you made an individual donation and you didn't get a ticket or tickets from us at the front desk, you should get your tickets if you want that sweet quilt, okay? Let's give our panel another round of applause. This is such a terrific session.